Okay, so tonight I'm going to introduce you to a brand new teacher, Ajahn Nanamoli. Um, so it was Bodhipala who put me on to this teacher. He's a Theravadan monk, and I'm not exactly sure who he did his training with, but he's moved back to his country of Slovenia. And I found this talk that he's giving tonight quite a clarifying, powerful talk. But he's going to talk about sort of meditation methods that are sort of what a householder would perform, all the way to what more people who are monastics would perform. So from tonight's talk, take out what feels right for you at this point in your life, because he's going to sort of do a gamut. Okay, so let me share this.
So you've been saying many times that the problem is that we are affected in the first place. In other words, anger is possible, lust is possible. We get confused.
Suffering is possible.
Suffering is possible for us. Could you? So the goal really is to not be affected in the first place, not to do something on account of.
Well, that's the kind of fundamental difference that I often try to highlight. Is Dhamma, the practice of Dhamma, is not supposed to just help you with things that bother you, help you deal with them. It's basically supposed to uproot your liability to things that bother you. So it doesn't manage your suffering. It removes possibility for you to suffer in the first place. So this is a personal goal for your practice. It should be, I don't want to begin with. Not, I want to have perfect management technique that will always help me deal with whatever suffering has arisen. See, that's the problem already. Suffering has arisen. You might be very skilled in dealing with it, but you're not skilled in not having it arise in the first place. And that's what should be your issue. So that's why even the Buddha would often describe his teaching, the freedom from suffering brings cessation of being. The ending of bhava, the ending of these things becoming for you, manifesting, enduring, that you have to manage that later. Means they're not anymore. Being has ceased, they're gone. So that is the goal of the Dhamma, cessation of being, not management of things that are for you here and now.
Cessation of
suffering, cessation of greed, aversion, delusion.
So I can get angry. I can get angry. Then I can find out some sort of technique to manage my.
Yeah, or when you're angry, think these thoughts. When you're angry, do this. When you're angry, do that. That's how it starts. You need to want to be free from anger to begin with. And then inevitably, your first effort will be directed at how to manage and subdue the anger. But you mustn't confuse that for the actual practice of the Dhamma, which, if done rightly, will uproot the anger. And it's nothing for you to manage, a burden for you to have to deal with. And if you don't do it, you will then suffer. But there is nothing to be dealt with because nothing affects you to begin with.
You say it's not the Dhamma, that management is not the Dhamma.
Exactly, it's like the approximation of the Dhamma.
So
But it's not the direct way, one way only. The way the Buddha would describe the Dhamma would always only result in purification of being, removing all the unwholesomeness and making bhava cease. Management doesn't do that. Only that direct insight into what uproots suffering, what is uprooting the greed, what is uprooting the aversion and delusion.
So the Dhamma, so what is the Dhamma? What is that?
Is a direct path for uprooting, not the management. So you are kind of responsible for whether things you're doing, whether you've taken them as Dhamma, whether you've taken them for the purpose of uprooting the issues, not dealing with it, but like making yourself not liable to them even in the future, or have you taken the Dhamma instruction?
Mm. Mm.
As a means sort of helping yourself deal with these things. So it's more like it's determined by you, by your attitude, whether that instruction will be taken as Dhamma or as management. That's the difference I'm pointing at. You know, like you can do Satipatthana, which is the Dhamma, the way the Buddha described, but you can do it for the reasons of managing your suffering, not for the reasons of uprooting it. It means you are responsible for whether it's management or it's the Dhamma. And yeah, that's why the Dhamma arises in those who see. You can tell the Dhamma directly. The Buddha would teach the Dhamma to somebody, but it wouldn't be the Dhamma for them because they're not understanding it. So there is no rising of Dhamma in their experience. But it is the thing the Buddha said, but they're not understanding it. So the Dhamma can only arise in that individual level.
The Dhamma, the way, knowing the knowledge of God.
The knowledge of the way of uprooting things, basically. That's what it is. The knowledge of overcoming liability to suffering once and for all, not just the knowledge of how to manage it skillfully when it arises.
So you can look and see, I am subject to something. So I will, things can go wrong.
Well, exactly. It's really on that level of I will experience this. I am liable to this. That's we often say it. That's why like we say the wise man reflect, the young man who lives the whole. I am prey to suffering. It's not necessarily suffering now, but the suffering will catch me at some point. It's inevitable, and you should have the like mental basically clarity enough, mental capacity sufficiently enough to start seeing that as the actual root of the problem. Not the fact that you might feel like, oh, I suffer now, I don't suffer tomorrow, or whatever. The fact that I will at some point, it's inevitable, and that's the true problem. Even if I spend the rest of my life skillfully avoiding all the major suffering, the fact is, it will still happen. I am still liable to it. I still have to make the effort to avoid it. That's already the issue. The divine message. You know, the Buddha was neither sick, nor old, nor dying when he saw a sick, aging, bad person. So you see that, this is directly present in my experience as the inherent liability. And that's where the issue is. And that's where this is the difference in practice of management and the practice of uprooting, let's call it that way. It's basically in recognizing like, okay, so there is no lust in my experience here and now. There is no greed in my experience here and now. There is no delusion in my experience here and now. Okay, I'm fine. No, but now, as the Buddha would say, okay, so if you ask yourself further, it's good that those things are not present here and now, but your next question should now be, so is it possible for non-arisen lust to arise later on? Now it's not here, but can it be here tomorrow? Oh, have I addressed that? Here and now, not wait for tomorrow to address And that's literally the crossroads between, are you heading in the direction of uprooting it, or are you heading in the direction of management? And most people go down the path of management, as in, I'll deal with it when it arises. Failing to understand that liability to future loss is a risen issue now. You don't have to wait for it to arise. Is there a chance for non-manifested loss, non-manifested aversion to manifest in my experience later? If you're not sure, it means there is a chance. If you know for sure, there you go, you confirmed it. So there is a chance that these things will arise. That's the issue for me now when those things are not present.
Anger is a problem. Possibility for anger is a problem.
Yeah.
Now, not in the future. It is now a problem.
And that's like what differentiates your practice from, are you aiming at the uprooting, or are you just aiming at skillful management? And you heard that yourself before. It's very common attitude of, oh well, most of the time you're not lustful, most of the time you're not angry. So see, you're doing fine. If most of the time you're not angry, it means anger is still your liability, your possibility, which means you're as angry. Yeah, you're not acting out of that anger as often as others, but that's just because you learn some management of your anger. You're certainly not uprooting anything if you have the attitude that most of the time these things don't arise from me. Yeah, but could they arise at any time? Yes, that's the issue you're not seeing, and that's why you're not uprooting anything.
So you see that there is a problem because you see and know that there is the possibility.
Yeah. So you have to train your mind to start seeing these possibilities as actually present, because they are.
So you can think to yourself, I can manage my lust or my anger quite well. I'm very skilled in that. I know all these different techniques, psychological methods to employ so that I can ease that anger, ease that lust, and be calm again.
If your way out of suffering is skillful managing it, you need suffering to arise first. So management requires suffering in order to manage it. So management cannot free you from that suffering. It can only deal with it once it has arisen. And most people, that's the kind of problem that's sort of relatively subtle, I suppose, is people, as I said, natural tendencies to turn towards management first. I'll take it, do the problem, do it skillfully, whatever else. But there is this kind of conflating that occurs and, or rather confusion. So through your management of suffering, you experience like less dukkha. And then at the same time, you kind of start basically passively assuming, hoping that all you have to do is manage your suffering long enough, and then somehow magically liability to dukkha will disappear. So all I have to do is adhere to this management and skillful avoiding and so on. And there's already implicit, as I said, wishful thinking, what that implies that you hope for suffering will then just poof eventually. From your management, it will just evaporate. But it won't. That's the point. The only way that suffering will evaporate is if you evaporate it. If you understand the core, pull the thorn out. It won't come out by itself. So uproot it. So if you keep managing it with a hope that somehow it will disappear on the level that I am still liable to it, means your practice revolves around wishful thinking. There is no direct insight. This is what to be done for freedom from suffering.
Because you don't want to make everyone's goal to not have
exactly. Everybody wants to be fully free from suffering, which means everybody wants to not even be liable to discomfort and displeasure.
So I start doing metta every day, and I stay calm. I don't get angry. But I have to keep doing metta because I can.
So your calmness then is dependent upon the factor of you sustaining your effort towards whatever you perceive metta contemplation to be. Which means if sometimes circumstances change, you get sick, or something happens, or too many things happen, you don't have enough time, so you cannot engage to that necessary extent of your meta contemplation means you're back within anger. So you haven't really uprooted anger, you just suppressed it with a certain practices. And as I said, it's not inherently wrong to do that to begin with, but it's inherently wrong to adopt the view that doing that uproots things somehow magically. The only way to uproot things is to directly see what uprooting is. And I just described it. It's recognizing that liability, the possibility of anger, possibility of ill will, possibility of sensuality, possibility of delusion, possibility of dukkha as the dukkha right now. Not to wait for it when it recurs.
So you see that possibility, So what do? How do you uproot this possibility? Tomorrow and not Sunday. If you're being aware of that, then
well, it's sustaining that. So can you sustain that if you're not keeping the precepts? Can you sustain that elevated state of mind that recognizes liability to dukkha without the actual dukkha being present there? If you're drinking, smoking, running around, distracting yourself, engaging in entertainment, no, impossible. So that the noble eightfold path, that's how you do it. Right livelihood, right view, first of all. So if your view still regards management as the way out of suffering, you will not stay on the level of quit. It's the possibility of suffering, that's the problem that must be dealt with, not the actual suffering that arises.
So yeah, how do I deal with that?
How do you deal with what?
The possibility.
Well, noble eightfold path. So right view, knowing that that's where the issue is, not looking elsewhere, right intentions, not entertaining, not delighting, not giving in to greed, aversion, illusion through speech, through your body, and your thoughts. So on every front, you need to build yourself up in order to be able to sustain that recognition of liability here and now is what the issue is. If you ask yourself, how do I deal with the possibility of future suffering here and now? You're basically asking how do I manage it?
How do I manage it?
Well, that's what you're implying, because you want to deal with it now. You deal with it properly, not give in to the view of management by realizing that you have no right to resist it. So you have to be careful when you start recognizing, the liability of suffering is the problem for me. You have to be careful to now not give in to the attitude of wanting to manage that.
So I want it to end. I want that possibility to be gone.
So then you really have to understand where the dukkha is there. Is the possibility in itself dukkha? Is that possibility of future discomfort, future disagreeable things, is that in itself dukkha?
The idea.
Yeah, that's also it. Is that dukkha? So what's the dukkha then?
I would say it's that unpleasant feeling. It's the displeasure that is there when I have that idea.
Right.
So I feel uncomfortable with the fact that in the future I will suffer pain, which I'm
Suffering presently because of that. So then the next question you should ask yourself is the unpleasant feeling there that you have when you think those thoughts. Is that a dukkha in itself?
It is what it is. Yeah, pain.
Well, yeah.
Problem is I don't want it.
So what is then the dukkha?
I mean, I would say, okay, it's the craving to be rid of it.
Okay, so how's that manifested? What is that? Practically, in your experience,
Resistance.
so yeah.
I resist.
So that's only that sense of entitlement. I should not have this. So you realize you suffer because you resist discomfort, even before the discomfort comes your way. See, you resist the thought of the possibility of discomfort here and now, and that's why here and now you experience dukkha. That's why the Buddha didn't say Vedana is the cause of dukkha. He didn't say feelings are the cause of suffering. He said tanha, craving, is the cause of suffering. Craving in regard to what you feel. So you have such and such feeling when you have such and such thoughts, present, future, or past. but it's your implicit attitude towards the feeling of either craving towards it or away from it. That's why that experience is dukkha. And see, you would have not seen that if you haven't forced yourself to discern the level of that possibility of dukkha is dukkha right now. You wouldn't have seen that if you were just fully bent on managing the dukkha as it arises, or managing the dukkha before it arises. Yeah, so that's what I mean, that even when people recognize sometimes the future dukkha, liability to the future dukkha, they can even take that as something to manage. So I'll do this, so these things will not happen to me. Which carries the implicit view that dukkha is in those actual things or in your actual feelings, and you don't see that it's in your attitude towards these things.
Yeah, that's right now.
Right here, right now, always present. Exactly.
Always experiencing that pressure.
The relationship between tanha and dukkha, between craving and suffering, it's always present. Always simultaneously present. Presence of suffering means presence of tanha. Presence of tanha means presence of suffering. So to the extent that tanha is present, to that extent suffering is felt. Or to the extent the suffering is felt, to that extent attitude of tanha is present. There is no delay, or a few seconds later dukkha comes as a result of your craving. So presence of suffering means presence of craving, presence of craving means presence of suffering. So that's why if you were to remove the presence of craving, there is no suffering amidst things that used to cause you to suffer so much. And that's why liberation is visible and possible from suffering here and now. So that's what I mean, you need to start seeing as dukkha the liability to suffering, not actually wait for the actual suffering and then manage.
If you don't see that liability, then complacent.
If you're not seeing the liability, means you are not seeing where your craving is.
You're not seeing dukkha. You're not seeing.
Yeah. You need to see the dukkha first in order to see the cause of dukkha. You can't just be dealing with the dukkha without understanding what dukkha is. That's what Buddha said. I'm teaching suffering and I'm teaching freedom. I'm teaching only two things, suffering and freedom from it. That's it. So if you don't see the possibility of future discomfort is already dukkha now, you're not seeing the nature of dukkha to begin with. So it doesn't matter what happens to you, you will not see it with the correct set of eyes, so to speak. And if you're not seeing what the dukkha is here and now already, you're not going to see a craving. As I said, to the extent that the dukkha is felt, to that extent craving is present. But you're not seeing the fact of dukkha, thus how can you see that which determines the actual craving? So that's what I mean, management, looking to deal with it over there, without seeing where the actual dukkha is, because you give in to that need to manage it and remove the pain, as opposed to understand it, it's inherently bound in the wrong view. It's inherently bound in the wrong direction. It's just like a way you can reflect. Why are you entitled to manage pain? Have you had statements that dwell on the nature of that dukkha, even the actual dukkha or the future dukkha? Just reflect it. Have you had statements arising? Can you prevent circumstances from becoming disagreeable at any point in the future? Is that even conceivable, actually? It's just a pure fantasy. Fantasy rooted in this complete misconceiving of the problem. Problem is in these things happening to me. Problem is not in me implicitly resisting the idea of these things happening to me. So how do you stop resisting the pain? How do you then stop craving, or rather welcoming the pleasure? How do you remove craving? Well, we just outlined it. By not trying to manage it, but by seeing it here and now already. And then by sense restraint, because you cannot possibly be welcoming pleasure and then just dealing with the unpleasant experiences when they arise. You can't just selectively pick and choose which cravings you want. If there is any form of craving present, it means liability to suffering is present. So you have to abandon craving for pleasure, in as much you have to abandon craving against pain. And so pain comes, pleasure comes. You're not saying it's arising. So why do you then constantly entertain the attitude of I want this, I don't want this. I have right to want this, I have right to not want this. Why do you go after one and try to avoid the other one? Because where is your attitude rooted? Why are you doing it?
Because pleasure and pains, yeah, it's felt, it's a pressure, it pressures you, feel it.
So it's painful to not do it.
Yeah.
So you do it because you want to avoid pain.
Because it's pressure, the pain is.
Pain is pressure. So exactly. So you don't know how to deal with dukkha. Thus, you try to get rid of dukkha. That's basically the nutshell of every management. And that's what it's inherently wrong. Even if you're doing the Dhamma, all the Buddha's instruction, but you're taking them as management, means you still entertain the same attitude because of which you suffer in the first place. Which is, I can handle this, I want to get rid of it. Which is the attitude of craving. So how can you then withstand the pressure?
I can withstand the pressure. I withstand the pressure.
Yeah, but can you withstand the pressure if even your physical behavior is not kept in check? Can you withstand mental pressure? Impossible. If your verbal behavior is not kept in check, like the outcomes of lust and anger through physical action, through verbal action, if you don't keep lid on that, can you possibly withstand things mentally? Not a chance. And how do you do that? By doing it. How do you become stronger? Well, by exposing yourself to things that will make you stronger, by training. Said it many times, like even when I first read that sutras, I was a bit puzzled, but really kept talking about he trains himself thus. The mind, skilled mind trains himself thus. Because you had all these notions about enlightenment and so on. What is there to train? You do things and then enlightenment happens to you. No. You train for strength, out of which wisdom comes, which is what enlightenment is. So as a sense restraint is not optional. So virtue is not, I can do it for a while. It's a necessary basis that has to remain throughout. So you will be able to withstand the pressure by not giving into pressure. By not giving into pressure, you get to outline what the actual problem is. Your liability to future pressure, to future discomfort, is already the problem right here, right now. And you see that now because you haven't just blindly gave in to managing the pressure in order to get rid of the pressure. Manage the stress in order to get rid of the stress. Practice the Dhamma so you don't get this particular stress in.
I recognize that there's a possibility of suffering. And I see that suffering right now. It's suffering because I resist the displeasure here and now. We're going to possibility. It's suffering because I resist. So I don't resist that discomfort here and now. But I must have that, I must still have that idea. I don't have to keep on thinking about that there's a possibility of suffering.
No, they will come and go.
So whatever, basically I have to look at whatever I feel.
Yeah, because that's what the resistance of birth. That's what craving is. It's where you feel.
Yeah, I can put the possibility of something, I put that aside, because now I know what the problem is here now.
Sure.
I've come to that.
You start, you contemplate the possibility of suffering when you forget what the problem is, or when you're not seeing it.
That's how you put it. Just like ask himself. I think so. What am I liable to anything? To any suffering?
Yeah, it was something
Is
like
there
that.
suffering?
Yeah, is there any suffering that hasn't, the possibility of suffering that hasn't been addressed, so to speak?
Yeah.
And like, no, I don't see it. Okay. He still doesn't decide, okay, I'm done now. No, you remain with that vigilant attitude. You don't say, okay, I'll check in every now and then and see if something has changed. The possibility for lust, aversion, delusion, possibility for pressure, possibility for central pull, possibility for suffering. Has that arisen now? Not the actual suffering, but the possibility for it being, oh, look, yeah, now I see, yeah, it could be possible. There you go, that's your issue, right there and then. So what do? Well, you don't lose the sight of it to begin with.
Feeling.
Yeah. You don't welcome it if it's the possibility towards pleasure and sexuality. And you don't resist it if it's the possibility towards pain and discomfort.
Is there anything that, is there a possibility for me to indulging?
Welcome. Indulging is too close already. The result of
pleasure.
exactly. So it's on the level of the possibility of pleasure or possibility of pain, which means on the level of welcoming some kind of shying away from. It's subtle.
So if someone brings me a pizza tomorrow, I'd love to taste it. Will I welcome that pleasurable taste? Will I get lost?
And you will know that if you're looking at things rightly, you will know that already now. You'll know, oh yeah,
I can't wait.
even if you are perfectly restrained and don't express your joy over the particular type of food brought to you, you already internally you know what it is.
And so that,
And that's the problem.
and but there's the work.
And that's the work, exactly. That's what the issue is. And people will, okay, so I will tell them never to bring that thing again because I like it too much. It's like, well, you can do that as a way of like, if you really can't deal with things, okay, put it aside. But that's really masking the issue. The issue is not the pizza or whatever people brought you. The issue is you're unable to restrain yourself. You're unable to have mind free from greed. So now you're just trying to remove things that make you greedy. But
You're able to not be wanting pleasure.
you are unable to exactly to not welcome that pressure of that pleasure. You're unable, which means that's where you will remain liable. You can spend 100 years of that management, you will never approve your sensuality.
So you feel the pressure of pain, the resistance against it, and you stop.
Well, exactly. You don't try to get rid of it. You don't try to psychologize, manage, explain, prevent things from arising. Obviously, if something obviously unwholesome, like when that man came and offered wanted to offer his daughter to the Buddha, and he was saying, no, don't even bother, I will not accept that. Like certain things cannot be done right, such as sexual intercourse and so on. But there are things that there's nothing wrong with eating food, whether it's tasty or not. But it's wrong in eating it with sensual reasons. And when you eat the food with sensual reasons, when you are unable to not be overwhelmed by that pressure towards accepting pleasure. So that's what Buddha would say, that when you practice in regard to the food, not that you stop eating. No, you eat mindfully. You maintain the reasons for your eating clearly, and you eat what those reasons are present. Reasons for health, sustaining the body so that you can practice further, not the reasons of gratifications, chasing the taste, and so on. But if you just think, if I avoid the food, I don't have to deal with these reasons, well, you're sort of mistaken. You're just covering up the basis of your sensuality. So even if you just eat horrible stuff all the time because you don't want to experience any sensual joy of the taste, you still need to look at these reasons and keep the vigilant eye on it, because that's where sensuality is rooted, not in the actual taste. So am I welcoming? Am I delighting? Am I accepting this elation on account of sensual prospect that is pleasing to me? That's the issue, my acceptance, not seeing the danger in it. Not
just to maintain.
Not that's the issue. Not the issue is, oh, I must not have this thing arise for me at all. All people tell you never to bring their food, you never see anything, you never hear anything, you never taste anything agreeable. You're misconceiving where the issue is. Well, you remain fully within it. That's why you're not stepping outside the sexual domain.
There might be someone that comes along.
And that's why the asceticism, the atmosphere, like giants, the perfect practice of obsessive ahimsa, non-violence, not eating, not harming anything, it's utterly misguided because it's fully misprojected. They don't see where the issue really is. Avoiding food, any food, just eating every third day, to the point of in the end you die on account of starvation. That's like the ultimate goal of the giant. Yet you realize you fully remain bound by the sensual domain, never a step closer to escape it.
was the Jains that said that by avoiding things, then you diminish diminish the pressure. But whereas the Buddhist way is
It's not, because it's not always the same things. You don't always have one attitude toward those things. If you were to only have the attitude of accepting everything, every type of feeling, every type of perception, then giants would have been right. All you need to do is avoid it because you always accept it. But that's not the case. You're not accepting the unpleasurable feeling. You are actually trying to get rid of it. You're only accepting certain things, but then you're resisting some other things. And so it's not a blanket rule. Always avoid, because it's not a blanket experience. That's always the same. That's why what you do, whether you avoid or whether you have to basically endure, is determined by how you feel. And you don't even feel that always the same in regard to the same thing. Sometimes one same food might make you happy, sometimes might make you unpleasant, sometimes might make you indifferent. Which means you have three different types of feelings. You have three different types of attitude that will then exhibit a craving. But if you always avoid everything, you're ignoring 2/3 of that picture. And that's why you will remain ignorant. So how can you then know when to reject and when to accept? Like when you're resisting gratuitously the future prospect of suffering, should you be rejecting that even more? No, you need to accept that these possibilities are there, present, and you have no say in it. That's how you can then stop resisting it gratuitously, and thus you approve the suffering. Or should you then accept the prospect of future pleasure that you're already delighted in? No, you must reject it. You must contemplate the danger in it. So how do you know what you do? Well, by learning how to be properly mindful of an enduring feeling. Because that's where things converge, that's where things are rooted. You can't just take a set of behavior that I will do this when it's this and this when it's that. No. First, you just need to remain mindful of what's the present enduring feeling, and you will know then what attitude is there. If the present enduring feeling is pleasure and agreeability, means you have the attitude of welcome by default. So that's what you reject. You reject your welcoming of this sensual pleasure. You don't blame, like giants, the actual objects of the sensual pleasure. So you will know what attitude is there by correctly understanding what present feeling is there.
That's the root of the problem. Is the
It's always present. The root of the problem is always present. It's not in the past. It will not be in the
that's
future.
the root.
Yeah. And
Attitude.
exactly. And the root of that present root is basically your attitude towards the present enduring feeling.
So it's whatever suffering will arise in the future. It's always
That's the gateway. It's within that. That doesn't disappear when the suffering arrives. That remains its vessel, so to speak, its framework, as I said. Because no amount of future discomfort and suffering can affect you unless you're holding on to that vessel of rejecting. Like the vessel of rejection, basically, of any discomfort. That's your mindset. So anything that comes of discomfort of nature, it's going to make you suffer because of your attitude of not wanting. You remove the attitude of the gratuitous attitude of not wanting the discomfort, not necessarily seeking it out, but certainly not trying to get rid of it. When it's there, exactly, when a circumstance arises, which inevitably will, then you're not cultivating that gratuitous mindset of resistance, which means your craving is not truly diminished. And same, you will diminish your craving when you don't cultivate gratuitous mindset of welcoming, as the Buddha said, delighting and taming the notions of current and future pleasure. But why you, like when you ask yourself, am I liable to future sensual desire? Oh yes. Why? Because here and now, I'm still holding it there. I'm still welcoming the prospect of it. Here and now, I haven't uprooted it. Not, I haven't dealt with it rightly once it has arisen. No. It's on the level of that possible future sensuality is only possible because right here, right now, I am still valuing it. I'm still haven't seen the thorough danger. I'm still on some level delighting in it. And that delight is to be dealt with here and now, not in the future when that thing arises.
I'm just gonna show you the his monastery is called the Hillside Hermitage, and I'm just looking to see if his name is here. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. It's Nanamoli, Ajahn Nanamoli. Okay. Forgotten how to. Oh, here's the stop share. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that was quite a little tropical place they were saying.
Competition and birds and dogs. I wanted to do that dog, but got a good rebirth in the monastery.
Yeah, he has, if you watch some of his other things, there's 3 wild dogs that they must offer some food to or whatever. Yeah, so their talks are always being interrupted by these wild dogs coming and wanting to sit on their laps or be petted. Anyway, he just brought up this very interesting thing about the difference between, are we just managing or are we really going, for awakening, like uprooting things at the root. So I just thought he made that pretty clear. Anyway, open it for some discussion. Oops.
I personally like the part where he's talking about, just cut things out of your life to avoid suffering. So I did that for a while. I'm like, oh, I'll just kind of all or nothing, or I just won't go into the chocolate aisle or something. But I have been thinking about this quite a bit actually these past couple of weeks. Is there's going to be people who do things that are in my life that I might not, feel is in alignment with the cessation, the path, being on the path. But how do I, uproot that so I can be around certain environments and certain people, but not have to just hide in the kuti or hide in my place or, and avoid the society basically, because there's just all these triggers and all these other aspects that arise, it's just a part of living.
Yeah.
So that was really, really cool to hear that, because I have been contemplating that just recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a question.
Yeah. We're just fooling ourselves if we're just avoiding things. We're not dealing with them. And again, just to remind you, he was, as I said, he was talking to another monk. And so this, this whole thing of not taking pleasure in food and other things, that's this is the path that monastics are taking. And so mostly householders are not there. You're a householder because you're still deciding to keep sensory pleasures in your life. You're not ready to let that go. So again, it's a whole gamut of sort of a whole range of where are you on the path of renunciation. And so you just decide for yourself where you are on that path. I think it's a very rich talk. So that's my 3rd time of listening to it. And think each time I've listened to it, I've gotten more out of it. It's a pretty packed talk. So you may want to listen to it a few more times. Oops, sorry.
I thought in some ways that there's a simple talk when he talks about suffering and uprooting or living with it. It's just like the four noble truths. You have to accept that there is suffering. Once you know that there is suffering, then you can make progress.
Mhm.
It's that whole imbalance of not really accepting that there's or knowing that there's suffering and trying to go about it in your path in a different way. It's just,
Mhm.
yes, there's suffering, and then you can start uprooting. But if you don't acknowledge suffering is now, here and now, then you try and look to the future or the past, and it doesn't get you anywhere.
Yeah.
I must say, I'm still at the stage where I'm very happy with management.
Right.
When management happens, it's really rewarding.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think that's where we all start. So, yeah. And so he was just making it very clear that this is not the end goal that the Buddha was teaching. But this is where we start. And then again, it's an individual choice or decision. Do you want to renounce further? Do you want to go further along the path? Or at this point in time, that's where you're content to stay. But I just loved his clarity, because I don't think I've ever had it said so clearly before. Any comments from our Zoom room? Stunned silence. Okay, here, Pratik.
I'm not sure if I understand this correctly, but maybe if you can guide a little more.
Yeah.
When you talk about the possibilities of future pain and pleasure,
Yeah.
and doing something about it here and now,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it? It's like you are actually manifesting it by doing something about it, even if it's going to happen in a future course of time. And is it quite right practice to even do something right now, or let it happen in future?
Yeah. So what I was understanding with that was that it actually is happening right here and now, because if your mind is going out to the future and worrying about it or thinking about it, then you're actually having an experience right here and now. And he's saying that the suffering is the fact that you're thinking about this. No, just a minute. There's two different things here. But the whole, it all boils down to how much are you resisting? Like, disagreeable things happen in life. I mean, that's just the way things are, including growing old, getting sick and dying, losing loved ones, your own health, your own death, the health and death of your loved ones, and then all kinds of natural disasters, fires, floods, hurricanes, losing your job, losing your pet, just a million different things. And it's our, it's when we don't accept that these things happen. That's, sort of like the root of our suffering. This is samsara. This is the world. These things happen. as Kelly was saying a little earlier, um, she's in social situations or just, yeah, in social situations where people are not acting, maybe with right speech or right behavior, but this happens. We're not in control of, everything in the world being perfect. And it's our resistance to this reality that's what's causing, uh, our suffering. So going back to Pratik's question there, it's, so the suffering is this resistance against these things. But he did say that knowing, if I can be clear about this, the reason we're making effort, doing the 4 right efforts on this Noble Eightfold Path is because we're aware that we aren't yet awakened. We haven't uprooted the root causes of greed, hatred, and delusion. And so that motivates us to continue to work. So it's not that we're conjuring up more episodes of greed, hatred, and delusion, but we just know they have not been removed. And so that's a motivation to keep working on the Noble Eightfold Path. So I don't know if that's sort of answering your question or not.
Yeah, like I'm still surrounded by that. If you're doing something right now, you are attracting that energy, which may not be there in future for you, either pain or pleasure. When you started doing something right now, you're inviting it.
Yeah, and what we're doing right now is following the Noble Eightfold Path. With right view, right intention, right morality, right mindfulness. So it's all good stuff.
Kind of think I know what you're trying to say, like, just with, I've been looking at this lately as well as the thoughts that arise, like some might not be very, nice, but then if I focus and give those attention and I use wrong intention, then I'll just draw that in more. And so that's, yeah, I just try and switch it to wise attention, as challenging as I can be. And then I do notice the manifesting of just attracting that vibration, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, it's 9 o'clock, so we'll move to our closing. So Alba, we close with one of the Brahma Viharas, one of the beautiful emotions. So they're metta, loving friendliness, karuna, compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, and upekkha, equanimity. So tonight is karuna, compassion. So first of all, bring to mind somebody that you know who has great physical or mental suffering at this moment. And while being aware of their particular difficulties, direct these phrases to them. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. And now send the phrases to yourself. May I be free of pain and sorrow. May I find peace. And now send the phrases to a neutral person in your life, someone you don't have strong feelings of love or hate towards. May you be free of your pain and sorrow. May you find peace. And now think of someone that you have a difficult relationship with and send the phrases to them. May you too be free of your pain and sorrow. May you too find peace. May all beings be free of pain and sorrow. May all beings find peace. Remember that all beings face great potential suffering, no matter how fortunate their immediate circumstances may be. This meditation does not eliminate suffering. What we are doing is being able to acknowledge suffering, to open to it and respond to it with a tenderness of heart, which allows us to join with all beings and realize we are never alone. May the merit of our practice be shared with all sentient beings, named and unnamed. Please, Blair. May all beings be well and happy. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you in 6 weeks when I'm back from my retreat, and Leslie, Ryan, Kusala, and Corey will be hosting. So come out and support them. Don't let them sit here alone. So I'll see you in 6 weeks, but hopefully you'll see each other next week. Good night.
Thank you, Sangamita. Thanks so much.
Have a good retreat.
Thank
Yeah.
Anumodana.
you. Okay.